My name is Kautar Hafidi. I will be the moderator of this session. So before going to present our panelists, I will introduce myself. Then each panelist will take 5 minutes to introduce herself. And then we can open for questions.
Is the mic on?
I think so. Yeah. Do you hear me? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I graduated in '99 from Orsay University in Paris in experimental nuclear physics. I came here as a postdoc, and I have been here since. So I'm now a staff in the physics division. I do research with the high energy accelerator to study the constituent of matter. I don't know if you have heard about quarks and gluons. And I have been married for 13 years. My husband is also a physicist in the physics division. He works on accelerator, and later on I will tell you the two-body problem. It's not an easy one. And I have a 6-year-old boy. I am also the Women in Science and Technology Program initiator and the chair of the Committee on Status of Women in Physics. I'm telling you all of that because this is part of work-life, not balance, because I don't think there is any balance in work-life. Always, as a researcher, we have always a problem balancing them, so we are gearing toward more work. But let's call it work-life satisfaction. You have to find a way. At least you have satisfaction in both of them. So, and part of the workload comes from the service work, which we will elaborate on that. So when you are part of committees, you serve the community. Also, it adds more workload to your research. In my free time, I play soccer, pools, and I prepare my black belt in martial art. So, here you go. Lynn?
Okay, my name is Lynn Trahey. I am an assistant materials scientist here at Argonne. I don't know where to start, so I'll start toward the beginning. I graduated from Syracuse with a bachelor's degree in chemistry in 2002. We'll probably get into this more in detail, but I went to grad school after that because I learned that you don't go into debt for going to grad school in chemistry. In fact, they pay you. So that was the main incentive to not make any more decisions for a little while and get paid to not make any decisions for a while. But then you have to keep kind of a pulse on where there's going to be jobs, and I wanted to get into energy and the environment, and as a chemist, I now work in batteries. So I did a postdoc at Northwestern, and that transitioned to a staff job here that I've had for about a year and a few months. I'm not married, so my work-life balance is not that big of a deal, but it's balancing expectations, because there aren't that many single 30-year-olds out there. Trust me on that one. So I have different stories than a lot of people might have as far as work-life balance goes.
Thank you. Margaret?
And I'm Margaret Goldberg, and I'm a group leader in the Chemical Sciences and Engineering Division. And I guess my story is a little bit different. Start out by just saying I also have a bachelor's in chemistry from Boston College, and that was where I met this guy who was just like, brilliant and charming and all that kind of stuff. So, okay, so he was a grad student and I was an undergrad, so he was an older man, right? So this is really good. Okay, so we both we both graduated the same year. We went off then to different grad schools. And so I went to the University of Michigan and he went to Brown, and we were in different fields, and we didn't know if we were going to be able to make it work. And so after a year, he decided he'd had enough of being apart. And so we got back together again, and I finished up my master's, and then we moved together out to Oregon, where he went back to grad school. And so then I worked for 3 years while he was in grad school, and then I decided I really liked what I was doing. I was working with students. I was at the University of Oregon working, and it was a lot of fun. I was living in paradise. It's gorgeous out there. You can just hike all the time. I bought a horse. It was wonderful. I was living in paradise. But intellectually, I was really kind of hurting. There wasn't enough to really keep me stimulated. So I wanted to go back to grad school. So I went to North Carolina then. And well, he's out in Oregon. So this is yet again another year that we were apart. And only this time going into it, you kind of knew that it was going to be bad because you'd already done a year of this. So yeah, it was a little harder the second time around. But we made it. So then he moved to North Carolina, and my boyfriend then became my husband. And I went through grad school and got my degree in environmental chemistry, which is really kind of a marine electrochemistry was the specialty that I was in, which was a lot of fun, and I really liked it. But there aren't a whole lot of jobs in marine electrochemistry. So, so when I finished that, I worked for a private company in North Carolina doing research as an analytical chemist. And we had our daughter. We built our dream house. Things were great. I was working around the clock. I was exhausted. I never slept. So I can't say work and life were exactly in balance. They weren't. But then my husband got this call from somewhere in Illinois, and they said, hey, we've got this really great job. Are you interested? And I said, but I really like where I am. So we talked about it, and I came out and took a look and realized that, well, with our daughter going into school and all that kind of stuff, that this would be a really nice place to raise a family. So I moved out here without a job. My boss back in North Carolina allowed me to telecommute for a year, which was great. So that allowed me to get time to actually find a job here. So, you know, kind of sometimes you have to jump off a lot of cliffs to make this 2-body thing or 3-body thing actually work. But so far I've been landing okay. We'll see if that keeps up. So I've been here at Argonne then since 1997. And working in nuclear fuels and working now with nuclear forensics. And so I find my work really fascinating. I would say just as Kautar said, there is no such thing as work-life balance. You work around the clock. You know, whether you're working to advance your research or get more presentations or publications or you're writing proposals, you're working around the clock and you're raising a family. So kids don't really care that you have proposals due tomorrow. You know, they're sick today. So there is no balance. You just give up on sleep because it's not going to happen, but it's okay. So I guess my message is just, I don't think there is such a thing as a work-life balance, but we're happy. So it's all okay.
Don't be scared.
So I can second that. And so my name is Felix Rivas. I currently an assistant professor at Chicago State. Chicago State University is in the south side of the city. For those of you who have taken the red line, is the last stop of the red line from the city, and then you walk like 2 miles to campus. So it doesn't work for me, but so it's kind of interesting that it's going to be 15 years that I was here at Argonne for an internship. And since that time, it's my journey on the no work balance, life problem. At that time when I was here, I had a girlfriend that was finishing up her bachelor's degree in chemistry. So I found this internship for 6 months because she was very smart and she finished in 3.5 years and I finished in 4 and a summer. So she catch up with me in 1997. We both got accepted to grad school. The way that happens was through someone who helped us both get in the same program. Otherwise, we would have been going to different schools at that point. And so we decided to start in January of 1997, going to Buffalo, New York. I'm from Puerto Rico. And so you can imagine the drastic change. Don't start grad school in January, start in the fall, it's better. Since then, we've been, grad school was probably the best time of trying to balance this life-work relationship because we're both in the same university, different floors, different advisors. We have lunch together, we have dinner together. She knew when I had to stay in the lab until 1 in the morning. She knew what I was doing. Other friends have the problem that, well, are you really in the lab at 1 a.m. in the morning? Are you sure you're not in a party with some other person? So I didn't have that trouble. That was the nice thing. Now, since the minute you graduate and you start looking for a job, then things get more complicated. 2002, she found a job in Illinois, and I was heading for a postdoc in Notre Dame. And we looked at it and said, well, Indiana and Chicago are not that far. Maybe we just commute without knowing Chicago traffic back then. So one of the first things we had to do was at one point decided whether we want to stay together or not. So we decided to stay together instead of being separate. So that meant one of us had to drop their current position to stay together because it wasn't going to work. That was my turn at that point, so I dropped my postdoc and have nothing. And it's 2002, it took me 4 years to get a permanent position. I did adjunct teaching, I did postdoc, I did work as a per hour job for 6 months, so to cover a gap on my resume. Now at Chicago State, it's been a journey of, again, it's like there's no balance. There's a time for I'll just put it, the time for Felix to sacrifice the time, the time for my wife to sacrifice the time. And then in 2007, we have our son. He's 4 years old. And now we have a girl that's going to be 2 pretty soon. And that just brought a bunch of other stuff I didn't know. And it's been very challenging. And before coming here, I was like, well, there's no balance in this thing. But like Margaret said, I'm happy I wouldn't, trade my children for anything. I'd been, 15 years since I started noticing this work-life balance. 20 years of getting to where I am. And sometimes your kids are so important that you just, some days I think, if I have to stop working, leave 20 years of effort to get to here, I will do it for them. So I will leave it there.
Okay, well, I'm Jen Sexton, and I work at Chemical Abstract Service, and I got my undergraduate bachelor's in chemistry and psychology, and I am the poster child of how not to go through undergraduate. I was taking Calc 1 and 2 my senior year, and still have nightmares that I forgot to go to the class and have to stay a 5th year because I've now flunked Calc and can't go to graduate school. And just like what Lynn said, I went to graduate school because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and the thought of free tuition and being paid to continue on in school, I could not turn that up. And I didn't want to do any of the jobs. I didn't want to be a lab tech. I didn't want to do what I could do with the degrees that I had from undergrad. So I spent 3 years at Notre Dame, and knew when I watched my lab mate spend 12 or 15 hours at the spectrometer, and then he would race back to the office to calculate rate of reaction. And I would think, I really don't care what the protein's rate of reaction was. I want to go home. That perhaps I didn't want to continue on. And I had thought that I wanted to teach originally until I found out that students actually don't really study, and they're still shocked that they have to memorize things, and that organic chemistry is difficult. And so I really had this huge turning point, and my boss was good enough that she said, we might want to see what other alternative careers might fit for you. And then there's the whole fact that I'd be talking while aliquoting things into my Eppendorf tubes, and you can't really talk and aliquot at the same time. You have to redo your experiments multiple times. So I got a master's in chemistry and applied at jobs everywhere. Actually, the whole resume review thing was very depressing to me, because that was like 6 months of rewriting my resume for every job that I applied to, because I applied to everything from sales to marketing to product distribution, anything that would use my science background in a very alternative manner. And got an inside sales position at Chemical Abstracts, and I kind of joked, having gone to school at Notre Dame, my dad's side of the family is Catholic, my mom's side is Protestant, but my very Irish Catholic grandfather said, I always dreamed I would have a child, one of my sons go to Notre Dame. He was like, who would have thought it was my Protestant granddaughter for graduate school? But so I joked that as a chemist, going to work at CAS is sort of like a Roman Catholic going to work at the Vatican. It doesn't get much better than that. And so my role at CAS kind of morphed from inside sales to we really changed how we handled the government market, because you guys are very difficult and very complex, and I really liked that. I thought it was very challenging, so I very much worked myself into a new position and went from doing inside sales for our commercial customers to basically managing all of our government customers in the US and Canada. And then that sort of got me promoted into an outside sales position just recently. So for a while, I was an inside sales rep who traveled very frequently. So now I probably about half the time I'm on the road, half the time I'm at home in Columbus, Ohio. And I'm married for 3 years, and my husband is, he's been married before. We have almost full custody of his 3 children. So they're with us pretty much full time. So I have an 11-year-old stepdaughter, Elizabeth, who is like me in every way. She's bossy and opinionated and controlling, and we clap. My mom's like, you chose this. If you gave birth to someone just like you, I might feel sorry for you, but you chose this person to raise. So, and then my stepsons are 8.5 twin boys, and then my husband and I recently had twins again. I have 19-month-old son and daughter, and so now we have like 8 million children, obviously, and my husband stays at home with them, and that really, if we both worked, if we had 2 careers, it would be impossible, I think. Like, I do not think that with how much I travel and how many children we have and just the kind of life we want for them, it wouldn't be possible. But he's a PhD chemist and taught for several years, and he always felt very conflicted. It's very interesting you say that you would, if you had to give it all up for your children, that you would be able to do that. And he really, never envisioned himself. Imagine going through everything you're going through and then staying home. And I mean, we knew basically when we made that decision that he was surrendering his career, that maybe he would adjunct at some point, but he would probably not get another tenure track position. And so, but he's been at home ever since we've been together, and that really helps. It isn't balance, and you don't sleep. I mean, that is basically, at times I'm responding to emails at 3 in the morning. I will say leaving academia and leaving the research-driven environment really affords you more of an opportunity to balance your home life and your work life. And I'm always shocked when I leave work like at 6:30 and that there's not very many cars in the parking lot, because I'm used to working until 7 or 8 or 9 o'clock at night or 1 o'clock in the morning. And so leaving, in some ways, the academic environment and taking, like myself, a more sales-driven position, yes, you might be gone for a week at a time, but then when I'm in Columbus, I also can work 6-hour days for that week, knowing that the next week I'll be out of town and we'll be working 12-hour days. And so that leads to a little bit more flexibility. But I will say, once you have children, you have no life anymore, because they dictate pretty much your entire schedule. And it is amazing. I have become one of those parents who is showing people pictures, and you do worship the ground that they walk on. But it does change things very much in your professional life as well as your personal life. And so definitely worth it, but definitely very, lots of sleepless nights. And that's even with my husband staying at home and managing, all of the stuff at home.
Okay, thank you. So you know everything about us. We would like to hear from you. Any questions, please?
My question is for Jennifer. Well, you said you're traveling a lot. How do you deal with the mother's guilt feeling?
I joke that I feel guilty that I don't feel guilty that I travel. So, and maybe my situation is different because I know my husband's there. And I watched my friends on Facebook, when they had babies and had to drop them off at daycare the first time, and they're in tears and their heart is broken. And I mean, I went to work and they were at home with my husband, and so that made it a lot easier for me. And I know, I mean, he thinks they're the best thing in the world. I come in like 6th on his list of, the best person on the planet. But I mean, honestly, I have to step back, because there are times when I feel bad. Like, I missed when my daughter Ariel started walking for the first time. My stepson called me. I thought something horrible had happened. I'm picking up my rental car. They call me J-Mom. He's like, J-Mom, J-Mom. He's screaming. I thought someone's died. And no, Ariel was walking. But I also missed she had a fever-induced seizure, and my husband's at the ER, and I'm out on the West Coast, and I'm, a whole day's travel back to her if something serious had happened. And you have to kind of step back and think, well, first of all, you're providing for them. Like, if I weren't working, we'd be on the streets. But second of all, that when you're there, you're there. Like, I try to be very much, when I'm there, and I'm not on the BlackBerry, and I'm not doing things, and maybe I'll go back after they go to bed at night, but I try to spend very concentrated amounts of time with them. But you have to step back, and you have to say, I'm not like the stay-at-home moms that at the school, once they hear that I work, they don't want to really talk to me anymore. Oh, what do you do? Oh, I work. They're done. And so it is just, you have to step back and just be comfortable with the decisions that you've made. Because really, at the end of the day, we all raise children in a million different ways, and they turn out well most of the time. And when they don't turn out well, it's not typically because of a decision that you made that was bad. And you just have to kind of trust in that.
Questions? Come on, are you all happy with your?
The eyes are like that.
Yeah.
They're scared. Yeah.
Now, before even entering the troubles of children, which I don't have, and I'm postponing and postponing until it will be probably the last day, like, come on, like it's today or never. What about balancing with your husband or wife? Because right now, I mean, I'm living in a foreign country, which I'm happy about, but of course, it carries a lot of issues and good things at the same time. And both my fiancé and I are researchers, which is, I think, no, myself and my fiancé. No, I couldn't handle two. No, no way I can do that. No, I have one. I have one, and he's more than enough. No, we are both researchers, and it is definitely tough. And I'm really thinking at least one of us should give up with research, because we are, just research itself is extremely challenging. Changing where to live every 2 years is extremely tough. And sometimes you're finishing your paper that you promise your co-author to finish by the end of the week, and you're like, have someone home waiting for me. How do you balance that?
Maybe I can, since I also come from a foreign country. So this is my story. All my life, my dream was to be a great physicist. And I left my country, my family, I went to France, and I met a guy. I'm from Morocco, he was from Tunisia. The first day I talked to him, he told me, oh, my wife should stay home. Then I was in the metro in Paris, and I lost the station. So I was so bad. How could you, the Arab man, how could you say that? He said, well, I'm talking about my wife. Why are you so unhappy? So we were just friends. At the end, he became my boyfriend, and we got married before I finished. But I told him, listen, I'm going back to the States because I did my experiment there. I'm not going to stay here, and you have to know that you have to come with me because I'm not going anywhere. If you agree, then fine. He agreed, and he came here. I was a postdoc at Argonne, and he was without work. You see, it cannot work if both of you, are driven toward your career. I was like that, egoistic, I just myself. He did everything, he came with me, and I was feeling bad because I was working, having fun. He was staying home, and he is very smart. So I went to our division director and I told him, listen, my husband is staying home. I wanted you to give him an office. Give him an office and a computer and let him do something. That was when he came here without pay. He was doing his, he's very good at computing. He was writing simulation codes. He talked to groups. One group needed some Geon 4 simulation, which is C++ based code. He started working on it. After 6 or 7 months, they had an opening as a postdoc. They took him. But we agreed that the one who can get a good career, we will go with. He really sacrificed a lot for me. I couldn't have made it without him. So in a couple, I don't feel that guilty, because if you are both really very motivated, he's very busy as I'm very busy, and we try to find the right time to really spend good quality time with each other. It's not perfect, but again, let's say I leave everything I do and I go to sit with him. He knows I will be unhappy. He knows I cannot give him anything. While if my career is going very well, I can go and be funny and we do fun stuff, I will be happy. So even for my child, I said, okay, well, I don't want children because I want to have my career. And he, in the first 3-4 years, he said, fine. I got position as an assistant scientist. Then I say, okay, maybe now we can have a child because I'm not sure that I really don't want children. So, you know, okay, maybe we can try. And I had an experiment which lasted 6 months. This is an accelerator experiment. So we go there 24/7 for 6 months in Virginia. I told him I'm not going to have a child until I finish my experiment. So I finished my experiment, and you know, we were lucky because we had a child. After he was born, he promised me that he will take care of him. And in fact, since he was born, he takes care of him. He picked him up, and he's really, I know what I want. So now he told me, well, you know, if we die, we will not replace ourselves. We need 2 to replace 2. I say, listen, Moroccan, there are 30 million. There are a lot of women that can have many for me. So I didn't want to add more because I really feel guilty. Sometimes I travel, I don't spend so much time. So the bottom line is, there is no magic solution. You know, the first thing you have to do, imagine you are in your 80th birthday, okay? This is your 80th birthday. And your friend, you know, are going to write about you something, you know, about your legacy. What do you want them to say? You want them to say, she was a great scientist, or she was a great mentor, or she was a great friend, or she was a great mom. So define what's your priority, what you want for yourself, and go for it. Because success and happiness, it's very relative. Some people want really to be great mom. This is the first priority. Others want to be a great scientist. So you have to define it for yourself, but you know, you have to be satisfied. If you feel that you writing the paper and leaving your boyfriend or husband by himself make you unhappy, then you have to, you know, tell your collaborators that they need to wait a little bit longer.
Yeah, that is thanks. That is the point. I mean, it's not. My impression, you know, after this little discussion is that your experience is like you decided what you wanted and you found the solution that is working, or kind of working. That is great. In my position, I'm still trying to understand what could work. You know, I would like to have a great career in science. I don't want to be the top of the top. I don't care about that. I want to have fun with what I want and produce something useful, but also achieve some sort of balance with my personal life. But I don't have a measure of, you know, to what extent that is reasonable to achieve. So is it just my choice, or is it like everybody's expecting me to publish 10 papers this year, and then of course I cannot have any balance with my boyfriend and living alone, having children. So this is the kind of questions, you know, to what extent you can achieve a sort of balance.
Hello. There is a possibility, like my wife is a scientist, she works at Abbott. Used to be called Abbott Laboratories, but it's just now Abbott now. And she's a senior scientist. I'm a professor at a university. So I think you could find a little bit of balance if the two of you, well, first of all, I would say, make the two of you the priority. And when that's established, then you'll be strong. You know, in 21 days, we'll be 13 years married instead of 8 years divorced, because we made ourselves the priority. You know, she told me, I'll quit my job to go with you. And I say, okay, if you are willing to quit the job that you just got for $90,000 a year, I can quit my postdoc for $25,000 a year. Even though that cost me, you know, you just don't do that in chemistry. You just don't leave a postdoc hanging. So there are going to be some sacrifices. And so what we do in our case, and not that we designed it, that we were so smart that we figured this out, because when I married her, I have no idea what I was doing. But it worked out that because I'm a chemistry professor and I don't teach until noon, then I can stay with my kids until 9 a.m., run to the shower, take a shower, run, and drive 50 miles to my work and make it on time to teach. Then I stay a little bit late those days while my wife left at work, because she works in a pharmaceutical company where you can't show up at 11. right? Professors can show up at 11 and pretend that they were having a meeting working at home or something like that. When for me, I'm just, if I can spend 1 more hour with my son in the morning instead of giving it to the daycare, I'll do that. So I find myself sometimes driving at 9:30 in the morning to make it to work. I hated it. I'm a morning person. I would love to be at my work at 6 in the morning before everybody gets there and get my stuff done, but I can't. So the couple has to, ideally, if you're thinking about this, it's great because we weren't thinking about it. Try to choose 2 careers where, you know, at least one of them doesn't have a time constraint. If I was working at Abbott, I would have been fired by now because I can't make it every day at 9 and stay until 6 or 7. But if one is flexible, you can work from home, one could be a consultant, it will facilitate things a lot.
I think you asked a really great question, so I'll throw in my 2 cents too. I think you can make it work in lots of ways, and in a lot of ways, I find it a real advantage having a husband who's in the same field as I am. So my husband is also a PhD. He's a geochemist, but he's also now working in nuclear forensics, which is really kind of weird to have the 2 of us, and we're kind of the weird couple out there in the community. But you know, I know some of the others that we work with sort of joke, you know, what do you think they talk about at dinner? But it's okay. But so in some ways, it's an advantage to have a husband who really does understand exactly what your pressures are and what your thought processes are. It's really kind of nice. But I guess the other thing that I'd say is there are a million ways to make it work, and you just have to be flexible. I mean, we have a lot of friends who are both PhD couples, and some of them do work in jobs. In fact, the job that I had before I came here was you had to be there at 8 in the morning, and it was inflexible. But you know, a lot of those kind of jobs have on-site daycare, and so my daughter rode with me in the car, and I dropped her off, and I could see her at noontime, and I could pick her up. I could see her any time during the day I wanted, actually. So there are a lot of opportunities like that. And then for a while we had a woman who lived 2 blocks away from us, took care of my daughter like before school and after school. She's become her second mom, and it's a wonderful relationship. She grew up with her family, and so I don't really look at it as that you are choosing negative things. You're actually in a lot of ways choosing very positive things. So I think there's a lot of ways that it can work out, you know, having a 2-career family. You just have to be kind of flexible and willing to try different things. But don't give up on it, it'll work.
Okay, I think you are the closest in age also. You have to tell her what you think.
Well, just briefly, I'm of the opinion that you can always make it work for yourself if you just know what you want. I don't believe in barriers with different workplaces and different bosses. I think that maybe I've been very lucky, but I've always seen what I've needed and gotten that. And I think that you just need to see it for yourself, and as opposed to thinking about the overwhelming future, because overwhelming is the word for a career like this. Think about it day to day. I don't know if this is advice at all, but maybe just changing your mindset and thinking about it day by day and forcing doors open where you don't know if there's a crack or not. There is always a crack, and you can always force doors open. I feel like I've created my position here, my postdoc, my grad school experience, everything's been tailored for me. And that's an option for everyone. And if you run across some major obstacle by way of a boss or a person, just go around it. So be positive. It's okay.
Just following up on that, I went to a workshop about work-life satisfaction. I keep going to workshop looking for that. So the answer is there is no magic recipe. But the thing that helps really each week, the beginning of the week, you have a list of things you want to accomplish that week. You want, for example, to go dinner with your boyfriend, run for, I don't know, 2 hours. You have to put these things in addition to your work, and make sure that, at the end of the week, you do that.
Put them in your Outlook calendar.
And if it doesn't happen, it should be an exception, not something that, but you have to keep record of that. And also you have to learn how to say no. Because many times what happens is somebody comes to you, could you please, read this paper for me, review that for me, send me that. And if you don't know how to say no, then, you can really get overwhelmed. So you have to maybe not say no, but say, okay, how about, I do this for you if you do that for me? How about I do half of it? Give something, but just because it's very hard when you are a postdoc to say no.
Just very briefly on that, saying no, if you're competent, you get asked a lot more than if you're mediocre at your job. So by being successful, you will have many, many more things asked of you. And saying no is advice that I've heard for years now, and it's very powerful. So I recommend it.
Sure. Questions?
I guess I really see myself in almost the same position as Qatar here. I am engaged to a software engineer. He works long hours, things like that. I am going to school for physics, and I really want to be a researcher. But I come from a family, and so does he, where the wife stays home and takes care of the kids and all this. And we've talked about it, and I've kind of been like, I'm going to work no matter what you say. And we've talked about maybe one of us being a professor so we can stay home. But with the paths we're on currently, it's something that we're both going to be busy a lot. And I mean, how do you really work with that? Because we do want to have children, we want to have a family, and I mean, we do have older family that we will be taking care of. So it's like, how do we both get what we want, but still able to do the things we want for our family?
Well, at least in my experience, I think choosing the group, even in research, choosing the right university, the right group, you really find very supportive people. When I came here as a postdoc, the guy who was the group leader became the division director. And year after year after year, he was telling me, well, we have a daycare. So I say, yeah, what do you mean? So it was very funny. We have a daycare, we have that. So I was thinking, he's maybe telling me, I should have a baby. So I listened to him. And even, one day, I think it was 2 years ago, I say, I'm feeling tired. He told me, is it what I think it is? I said, no way, no more children. So I think finding the right people. And now, I think the new generation now, they require more work-life balance. For example, at Argonne, they know that if they want to attract really the best and international workforce, it's very important for them to find a work-life balance, because European, they have 2 months vacation. They don't know. You don't?
We don't at all.
I was in France, and I was in.
I'm Italian. We don't have.
Okay. Well, I had 2 months vacation. And when you have a children, you can have up to 6 months or 2 years without pay. So I think this is in the culture. While here at Argonne, you have children, they give you sick days. It's a sick condition, so you have to take. So, finding the right place. Now, even in universities, if you have children, they can stop the tenure track clock, because usually, it's 5 or 7 years. So people are really becoming more and more aware of the work-life balance. And I think if you really, you know what you want to do and you are good at it, you have to be able to manage your time. Because, people don't expect you to give up being a mom or, having a family for your research. It's not, it's not human.
Well, and I think also, I think that the #1 thing is that you talk with your partner about this, and it sounds like you're doing that. Like you're saying, I do not want to stay. That was me. I didn't want to stay at home, and my husband has exponentially more education than me. It would make sense that he would be the one working, but he had already done that for a while. He was, we knew that we needed somebody to, and so that having that conversation with your partner really alleviates a lot of the stress. And I know as we're talking, nobody's had like the perfect career up here, keeping in mind that at some point somebody's going to have to compromise, just like with everything in your relationship. And the other thing I will say too is that the myth that you can like work from home and spend time with your children as you're working, so is not possible. I worked from home this week one day to work on my talk, and like I was upstairs away from everyone, and I heard the screen door open and shut like 50 times, and I'm mentally thinking, oh my gosh, how much more are we paying in air conditioning, because they're in and out and they're in and out. And like I went down at lunchtime with my computer, and the babies are smacking the keyboard and they're deleting things. And so like keep in mind, if you don't have children and you think, oh, if I get a job, well, I can work at home a few hours of the day, you can't. Like if you're at home, you're home, and if you're at work, you're at work, and there's not really a good way to mesh, or if there is, I'm just horrible at it. But to keep that in mind, because I know I have friends who think, oh, when the baby comes, I'll just work at home, and it doesn't work like that. But conversation with your significant other about what you want and what you would be willing, I think, to give up, I think that's the #1 thing. And you're going to feel like you're horrible at everything. I'm a big Sex and the City fan, and so if you watch that, when Miranda has the baby and she's getting in trouble at work for being late, and she's late with the babysitter to get the baby, and you feel a little bit like you're sort of a miserable failure in every single area of your life. So you have to just lower your standards a little bit and say, gosh, I'm amazing because I'm doing all of these different things, and I'm doing 95% of what I need to do in all of them, rather than feeling like you're just such a failure because you can't be perfect in everything. I mean, you can be a workaholic and be good at work and have nothing else, or you can, try to intermix everything and be somewhat good at all of it. And at the end of the day, nobody's really going to care if you got that last paper out, and honestly, kids are a little more forgiving than, I mean, if you miss something there, it's not the end of the world, as long as they know that you love them at the end of the day too. So. And
for your in-law, I have the mother of my husband, she's from the south of Tunisia. She doesn't even can call her husband by name. I say, who came today? She say, he came. Who? He. She cannot even say his name. So she came to the US for the first time and spent with us 2 weeks. At the end of 2 weeks, she told me, I lost my life cooking and cleaning. So my husband told me, you are getting my mom divorced. So they can't change their mind. Okay, questions?
And some of these things may not make sense to some of you because you don't have a son or a daughter, and you could plan to say, oh, I don't want to stay at home, I want to work, and I want to get all this done. Then you have a child. And even if you don't think it's going to happen, your mind may change. I'm not saying that's going to be your case, but it have changed with my wife too. And we're like always struggling to say, well, do you want to stay home? Do we want to do things differently? You make more money than I do, so do you want me to stay home? We have all this talk, but I think the bottom line from what we've seen here, and it's something I heard from a friend, he said, you have to give your partner the priority in the family, even though if it sounds cruel, because your kids are going to be there, they're going to leave, and who are you going to be left with? Sure. Your partner's going to be there, and if you didn't take care of them, no wonder why we have a rate of divorce so high now we're stuck together, there's no kids to avoid our interaction. What do we talk about? There's nothing in common between you and I. So I found that giving her the priority and having that date once a week. What we do is we hire somebody and we go to the coffee shop that is only 2 miles away, because if we go too far, then there's no time to talk. At least she can talk well. I'm driving, but I can't talk and drive, sorry. So I say, go to the nearest coffee shop and we talk for 2 hours, we go back and say, okay, now we plan the week, and then at least I know that Tuesday morning, every 2 weeks, she has group meeting, she has to be at 8 a.m. in the morning at work, and I have to wake up the kids, get them dressed, get them to daycare. Then I can drive to my work. But if I didn't know that, then I'll be like planning, okay, at 8 a.m. in the morning I can meet and do these things. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work. You got to communicate a lot. Email, texting, all that.
Sure. Questions from men? The men are happy, your wife will do everything. Come on, I'm challenging you. Okay, well.
Okay. What if it's not a choice? What if you both have to work, not just because you're determined, but because you don't have enough money to support your family or your kids? Like, what if it's not an option? Then how do you balance your work life? Because both of you have to work. It's not a choice like, oh, I can give up my my job for you, or you can give it up for me. You have to work. It's not, you don't have an option.
Well, I think that happens to a lot of us. You know, I mean, my husband and I both really love what we do, so in that sense, we've always wanted to work. But it would have been pretty ugly if one of us really had to stop. You know, financially, it would have hurt. But I think, you know, one of the questions I'd ask you is, do you have? Are you an Argonne employee, or you're somewhere else?
Research aide right now.
Okay, so I mean, just yeah. So just thinking, like at a place like Argonne, there is on-site daycare. Places like that have a huge advantage, I think. It really helps with life a lot. And the other thing about working at a place like Argonne is, at least for the most part, we're really, really flexible about hours. So I've got people who work for me who work from home half the day. And I'm perfectly fine with that. They get their work done. That's all I care. I don't need to see them right next to me. That doesn't matter. So it does depend where you work, you know, as to how easy it is to make things work out for couples and for families. And not every place is the same. You know, national labs are really kind of nice in that regard.
Have you priced daycare ever? So I think I have a friend who has 2 children and desperately wants a third, and if she has a third, she has to stay at home because it's too expensive to put 3 children in daycare. So, I mean, I thought we'd be a 2-salary family because I didn't want to cut back. And so there's always another option. I mean, if you both have to work, it's that compromise and conversing and, you know, coordinating schedules. And it is tougher. I mean, that is the #1 thing that my colleagues talk about, is it's really, really hard when you both have careers because kids are always sick and they always have school activities. And even with my husband at home, it always seems like I'm taking off an hour here or there to go to something for somebody. And so I think it is harder, but there's lots and lots of people out there who do it very successfully. But at the end of the day, I think you do have to just be at peace that you're not going to be perfect in every area and that things will slide a little bit, but you can do a reasonably good job at all those different areas.
Questions? What I've heard also is usually people who are, let's say, faculty in universities and even employers, they are not aware of all the possible things they can have and they can use. There are a lot of policies and people would not bother go look, see, you know, even for, you know, you have, it's not only, you know, having children. Some people have sick parents that, you know, they have to take care of them. So, you know, and there are some universities that have, you know, regulation. You can have 1 year off or flexible time. They can cover some of your teaching to take care of elderly parents or something that happens to you. So you have to make sure that all the tools in your institution, you know of them and you can use them as needed. This is one important thing I would say.
I'd like to sort of jump in on that.
Sure.
Working at a nonprofit, flexible work arrangements are something that have become, oh sorry, I'm breaking my own rule. Flexible work arrangements are things that I think are becoming increasingly more accepted. You know, whether you work 9-hour days and you take off every other Friday, or you work at home a certain number of days a week, or, you know, I feel more and more employers are recognizing that driving 2 hours a lot of people will drive a 2-hour commute one way to come to DC, and then you know, that's an extremely huge waste of time when you can have your employee working at home. So Jennifer's absolutely right. You cannot work at home, and I don't know this because I have kids, but I have many colleagues with kids, and you cannot do the work at home and take care of your kids. But I think more and more employers are recognizing that circumstances are different for different people. And so anytime you apply for a job anywhere, you should find out what all of their flexible work arrangements are and what they're willing to do in terms of helping you, and whether they're, you know, some places are very inflexible and they won't give you those options. So I think it's important to explore those before just flat out accepting a job if you're not aware of those things.
Even graduate school, you know, there are some graduate school that, you know, if you are pregnant or have a baby, they have even for the healthcare coverage is good. So I think those are parameters you need to, you know, before applying or before accepting a job, to discuss with the people.
Other questions?
you know, what happens usually, I think this work-life balance affects more women than men, because, you know, that's what the society expects from them. So I've known that in many cases, for example, we offered positions to postdocs, women, and they refused them because their husband or partner had another postdoc position somewhere, although sometimes we offer even to the partner, to both of them come here. And the woman chooses to sacrifice to follow her partner. So I think for women's sake, they should stand up for themselves, you know, and if there is a good reason to sacrifice, fine. But if there is no good reason, I think nobody will make this decision. The other thing is statistically, 80% of the women in science are married with men in science, while for men it's 30 to 40%. So this is really a problem for women mainly. Also, statistically, it showed that a lot of women chose to go to universities where they have undergraduate teaching mainly, because the big university, they are expecting a lot from you to tenure. So there is a huge competition, you know, and unfortunately, the biological clock doesn't allow you to wait for too long. And, you know, you say 30 and not married, believe me, I know many. Fortunately, my former graduate students. So it's not, you know, it's tough. It's very hard. You know, when women get a PhD, everybody's running away. So you have to get you know, your partner early when you are still in high school. And then he's stuck, so cannot go anywhere. Okay, so last question, or are we on time? Or? Yeah, we're good. Come on, I should have a man asking. What?
And here, if they don't have any questions.
Yeah, don't you have questions?
Can I ask why the guys came? Did you come because your partner told you to come, or because you just have specific things? Anyone? No one's going to talk.
It's hard for everyone, especially the young generation, now that men are really very supportive. Okay, go ahead.
Since no men will talk, I know one thing my fiance is always complaining about, and well, not complaining, but he talks about, is he feels as though he needs to provide for us, and he needs to take care of us, he needs to do all this stuff. How do you kind of, I mean, how do you really deal with, I can do that too? Like, it doesn't have to be all him, but he feels that way.
There you go. Any men here that can, you know, comment on that? Do you feel really you need to have a...
I mean, it depends if he truly believes that is the truth, and then I would agree with her. If I were you, of course. If he feels this pressure, because it's our culture or our previous culture or some unknown voice that speaks in his mind, then he has to talk with that voice and find his own way. And then he talks to you and you find a solution that works for you.
I think it's more a societal thing. He feels like that's what he's supposed to do, and he wants to be a good boyfriend, husband, whatever. He wants to be that. And what he sees as, I mean, what his dad was the provider, his mom didn't work, his grandfather was the provider, like that's just how it works. And for us, our relationship is different. I make the money, he works, but you know, we make about the same. And when I make more, I support us. When he makes more, he supports us. That's just how it goes. But I feel like he feels bad sometimes because he can't be there, or he can't, if something needs fixed, he feels bad because he has to work and he can't do it. So I do it. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. And he doesn't really, but he feels bad because he feels like he should be doing that stuff.
I think we all feel bad for something that the society is telling us that should be that way or the other way. And I think each of us has strategies. I don't have this problem, so for me it's very easy to. But I can relate to similar. I mean, I also have some voices in my head telling me that I should do this and this and that, and then, you know, sometimes I agree with those voices, and then I'm in a kind of peace, and sometimes I disagree and I try to kill them. Pretty much.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like women sometimes feel, I know I feel often, well, I haven't made dinner in 3 weeks. I'm kind of a, that's, you know, I feel like sometimes it's like, oh, I really should have, you know, done something for him. I've been busy.
My husband.
Yeah, I wanted to say something as the male person here. Let's see. The best time I've felt in my career has been when I know that my wife could stay at home if she chooses to. And that's just something natural in me. I think that if I can provide for them, then there's something in me, my brain starts working better, I start getting ideas about proposals I could write. But when I feel I can't do it for my family, then I just don't work that well. So there's something natural about him, and it's a good feeling that he wants to provide for. What you probably have to let him know is that the other things that he is doing is also part of that, because we have it in our mind that is providing for the family is provide the money to pay for all the food. But, you know, it counts too that you babysit for me so that I can go to work early. So, but sometimes I don't see it that way. When I babysit my kids, I don't think I'm providing for my family. My wife lets me see, well, you're not that bad of a husband because you actually stay with the kids. But to me, I sometimes don't see that as a valuable thing. So maybe helping him to see that the other things, not the salary maybe, but the other things that he will do are part of his new male role in this new society. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, my husband, the stereotypes are terrible. I mean, the moms at school wouldn't talk to him for the first year and a half, and he'd be there every day to pick up my 3 stepkids. Every single day, it took him a year and a half to like actually talk to him, and they still don't really accept him. And when I was pregnant with the twins, I spent the last 3 weeks in the hospital because I had preeclampsia, and the nurses there wouldn't talk to my husband, wouldn't give him information, really would only talk to me. And then when we had the babies, they're in the NICU for 2 weeks and 3 weeks each, they would look at me for every single question. They would not look at my husband at all. And I came to the point where I just stopped talking. I wouldn't respond to them, and he would respond, and they would still look at me waiting for an answer, even as he's talking. And so, like, society is really, really, I mean, they put men in a role and they put women in a role, and if you do not fit in that role, you are ostracized. And I think, like, we talk about how hard it is for women, and it is really hard for women, but I think it's also really hard for men, especially if their partner is in a more dominant role, whether it's because they're making money or more money, or they're working, or they have a more prestigious job, or they've turned down a postdoc because their partner has a job. And so, because I know for my husband, it is like that's something he struggles with daily. He will say, well, I'm not contributing anything to the family. You're making all the money. It's your money, you know, like he will, and he's a very progressive man. Like, I didn't change my last name, and he was totally fine with that. Wasn't at all upset by that, not even an ounce. But it's still hard for him, with as progressive and forward-thinking as he is, that I still have to remind him, you're staying at home with them every single day. Like, should we calculate out how much we'd be paying in daycare, and that's your salary? I mean, like, you would be making more than me then. So I know that's really hard, and especially if they come from a traditional background, it's even harder, and probably something that I think men maybe always have sort of in the back of their head, like, this is my responsibility, even if they are the most progressive man on the planet. And so it goes back to just talking and being open and discussing what you want, or what you might want, or what you would be willing to compromise, and I think that at the end of the day is the most critical component.
Okay, before we close, I would go to each one of you and ask you, if you had to do it again 15 years before, would you do it the same way? What you would change? Okay?
I think I will have kids earlier, actually, because graduate school is bad, but it's more difficult when the two of you are working, you're already outside, and there's expectations of certain things. And I used to think that my advisor was kind of a little bit crazy. He had 4 kids by the time he was an assistant professor. And his wife eventually stopped working and stayed at home to be able to manage all that. But I look back, it's like, I'm not as young as I used to, and I could have the kids earlier, even though if it meant to have to struggle through graduate school, well, it's not that different than struggling with 2 positions and trying to get tenure. It's probably more challenging.
And you have more energy when you're younger.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, I guess maybe I'd take a little different answer just to say that I can't say that everything went perfectly for us. You know, we really jumped off cliffs on a pretty regular basis. But I don't know that I'd change anything. I think really the bottom line is we're both pretty happy people, and we're happy with our family and our careers. So I don't know that I'd change it. Things might have worked differently, but it's all okay. It'll work out.
Well, can I follow up with that and then say, then what do you think was the sort of best decision that you made in that trajectory that you're glad you made, since you won't change anything? Give it a thought.
Well, I don't know. You know, family-wise, certainly we're going to be married. It'll be 30 years this October.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, I think I'm happy with the marriage. I'm happy that I made that decision. My daughter turns 21 in 2 days, and she's a wonderful, delightful, fascinating human being. So even though I wasn't the one at home raising her, she turned out great. You know, she really did. If I had stayed home and raised her, she'd be a basket case now. So, you know, non-traditional approaches work, and things work out.
Thanks. As far as changing things over the last 15 years, that puts me at 15 years old, and I still would have gone to college. I may have decided on a different college. I went to Syracuse University because I liked the colors blue and orange together, and I liked that they had a good sports environment, and I didn't have any school spirit when I went there, so that was all very wasted except for the cool colors of blue and orange. And they did not have a really good chemistry program, so I probably could have gone to a better chemistry school for undergrad. I still got into UC Berkeley, and that's one of the best grad schools for chemistry, so it didn't really affect anything. And I still would have gone to Berkeley. I still would have done the same type of research there. I still would have come here to the Midwest. I think the one thing I would change in retrospect is I would have tried to get more motivated to publish more papers in grad school. Publishing is a huge metric in this field, and as much as I wish it wasn't a metric, it is. And I had a tenured professor at Berkeley who didn't really care. You know, you can publish. If not, I'm not going to lose my job. So there was no pressure. That's probably the one thing I would change, is I would try to find the motivation to have more papers on my resume so that I could then maybe get the fellowship for the postdoc as opposed to just the postdoc, that kind of thing.
Well, I would have taken calculus my freshman year of undergrad rather than my senior year. But I think at the end of the day, I mean, there's not really anything I would change. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not happy with something, I mean, when I'm in grad school and I was so literally unhappy with my graduate school experience, I went on antidepressants because I didn't know what to do with my life if I wasn't going to get a PhD. Like, are there any other jobs out there that use science? And so if you're not happy, reassess, because there's always something else that you can do. And my undergrad professors always said, like, scientists can do anything. Like, we learn how to creatively think and how to problem solve, and anybody would be happy to have someone who can think out of the box and problem solve, and you can do pretty much anything with a degree in science. So if you end up somewhere and your partner's getting into, a position somewhere and you're willing to be flexible enough and move, I mean, you can do that. And I mean, we've all taken kind of crazy leaps and ended up in places where we're relatively happy. So I will comment, my husband's older than I am by 16 years, and he's exhausted. He was like, oh my gosh, it's so much more tiring this time around. So I will say that, I mean, that if you're thinking I need to wait to have kids until I'm in the perfect position and I have tenure and I've achieved these things, like, that's not necessarily what you want to do, because you'll be tired at the end of the day. And like, I did all the midnight feedings because he would like wake up, be like, oh, there's a baby crying. So, I mean, that is something to think about, because you're never going to feel like you're in that right place. I mean, my in-laws are PhD chemists. They both have tenure. Their daughter's raised and gone. And Claire couldn't go on vacation until she finished that last grant proposal, and Wiley's waiting around for her because his was done 2 weeks ago, and she's like, I can't go, I'm so stressed. She's pulling all-nighters writing her proposal so she can get funding. I mean, you always have that feeling of pressure on you. You never feel like you've arrived. So don't put something off just because you think you have to get to a specific place. And that would be my only piece, is you don't need to wait to do some of these things, because you will get tired. If you're tired now, you'll get more tired, unfortunately.
Well, anything from you? I think I wouldn't change anything, but the best thing that I ever did is I married my husband. I think he is really, I'm so lucky, and he's not that lucky. Okay, so let's thank our panelists. Thank you.